everyone. I'm Christine Tulley, President and Executive Writing Coach at Defend, Publish, and Lead, and welcome to episode 223, Complete That Dissertation. I found after working with many dissertation clients this spring, or in the spring of 2025, that we tend to have behaviors that we say will help somebody complete a dissertation or not. And there's plenty of advice books out there on trying to actually get some writing done, make sure that you graduate, pass your dissertation defense and all of that. But what I found with our clients, and this is something I've been looking at really for the last 2 years with dissertation clients. So now last spring's clients and all of the ones graduating this spring, that we really come down to 4 practices that are actually helpful for completing the dissertation. And so today what I'm going to do is talk through those 4 practices and then also let you know about a free webinar to see some of these practices in action. So one of the things that I think is really helpful to do if you're somebody that is, trying to finish your dissertation, is that as you get closer to the end, it is really important to sort out tasks that are sort of must-do tasks versus those things that are nice to have. So for example, we had a client that essentially really hated their theory. They wanted to go with a different method, but dissertation was around 60 to 70% done. And the dissertation advisor said, this is a dissertation that it's not perfect. We can leave it as is. We can put some of those things in the conclusion as future directions. But I know that our client really was unhappy with this and really wanted to go through and change the theory and change the method and all that. And so at some point, you do have to ask yourself, am I willing to just complete it? Or am I willing to do all these things to make it sort of, the dream dissertation? And most people, when they get to the end, kind of come to the realization that most dissertations are not perfect. Lots of them aren't. And so I think a good first step is just to sort out everything that is left to do with your project into those 2 categories. What's a must do, meaning my advisor requires it, my university requires it. If I don't do it, there's going to be this other major flaw happening in my dissertation. So some examples could be something simple like I have to use APA documentation style, but other things could be more that maybe your advisor wants you to use or your dissertation chair wants you to use a particular term and you need to change that all the way through the defense. You also maybe at this stage have other committee members' feedback. So figuring out the must-dos and then figuring out what's sort of nice to have is helpful. And if you want, you can even sort this into 3 buckets. I just did this with somebody yesterday where we said, okay, what is everything that has to happen with this dissertation? And we spent an hour coaching, just walking through all the tasks. So must-dos, I think there were somewhere around maybe 40. The nice-to-haves were things that if there was time permitting that this client would do them. And then the last one was sort of the ideal, that I really wish I could have this other thing going on. So I know one thing that happened as far as an ideal change in the dissertation that we did manage to pull off is that this person really did not like the way that some data was represented in tables, and they really wanted to make those tables into figures. So that's something that's time consuming. The dissertation chair wasn't asking for it. It didn't need to be done to be completed, but it was something that was really sticking with this client, and we had time to pull it off. So even though you're sorting things into sort of must do, nice to have, and if you want that 3rd column, the ideal, sometimes you could still pull off some of those ideal tasks, but you'll run out of time at some point. And I think the main point of that exercise is just to say, okay, if I have 40 things that are must do's, those all have to happen. And, at some point, if I run out of time, I may not get to those nice to haves or the ideals. And sometimes some of those things aren't possible, but just getting very realistic about, okay, not all writing tasks are the same. There's a big difference in, say, changing a definition all the way through a dissertation to having to rework an entire introduction or something like that. So just doing some quick sorting is one way to get just a little bit more clarity on where you are and how close you are to being finished. Another thing that I think is really helpful to do is then to categorize sort of the must-dos into 4 buckets. And we did an episode on this a while back called Categorizing Revision Tasks. I will put this in the show notes. But essentially what this does is it basically asks you to look at writing tests. And this is good for anybody. So if you're not writing a dissertation, or maybe you're supporting dissertation writers and doing your own writing, sorting these must-do tasks into a grid where you say, okay, this is something major. It's going to take a lot of time. and it has to happen through the whole manuscript is one choice. Another choice would be it's something major, but it only has to happen in one area of the manuscript. So for example, I mentioned reworking something in the introduction. If we don't do it in the introduction, we may not need to do it anywhere else. The other two choices are this is something that's easy to do, like, for example, just changing a term or updating a reference that has to happen through the whole manuscript. And then the last one is easy to do, but only one time. And those are the easiest tasks to do. Sometimes those fall into a nice to have bucket. So doing that, I think, just gets some real clarity on where you are and how much time the task will take, which tends to be a big issue. A second part of that equation, and maybe the last piece of advice to getting closer to completion, at this brief episode here, would be then to get help for those big tasks that go across the manuscript or that are going to require a lot of thought or time. Those are the ones to focus on talking to your advisor about, or potentially asking a committee member, somebody else that you trust, to see if they can help you solve those, or you may need to devote more writing time to solving those. One free resource you can use with us at Defend, Publish, and Lead is a free 30-minute consultation. Use that consultation to figure out one of those big pieces. And then finally, I mentioned that we are having a free webinar. I'm going to throw it up on the screen for anybody that's in YouTube, but the free webinar will be on April 23rd, 2025. So we'll be doing this one at 11 a.m. Eastern. If you register, you can get either the recording or join live. All registrants will get the recording, and we encourage you to join us this week. I know many of you are finishing dissertations. You don't have to struggle alone. There's lots of different ways to do it. So this webinar is one free way to do it. Another free way is to book 30 minutes with us, of course, at Defend, Publish, and Lead. So we're looking forward to working with you, and happy writing.